Welcome to the deep dive. Today we're going straight into the thick of it, really.
Yeah.
That controversy around Max Verstappen's penalty at the Saudi Arabian Grand Prix.
Mm-hmm.
You shared a transcript from F1 blogs, and it's titled, "The Evidence That Convinced Red Bull Verstappen Was Robbed of Saudi Arabian GP Victory." So that's what we're using to sort of unpack this whole debated moment.
Yeah, sounds good.
Our goal is pretty simple. Figure out why Max got penalized, understand why Red Bull is, well, let's say disputing it, and maybe look at the bigger picture implications for F1.
Absolutely. And the core issue, as F1 blogs lays it out, was that pass or attempted pass by Verstappen on Oscar Piastri, turn one.
Right, the very first corner.
Exactly. And the stewards hit Verstappen with a penalty. The reasoning basically was for running off track and gaining an advantage.
Gaining an advantage, okay.
Yeah, and the blog suggests the stewards felt he didn't slow down enough when he came back on track, and he kept quite a gap to Piastri afterwards.
Okay, right. So let's get into these driving guidelines F1 blogs mentions. They seem key, but it also calls them a secret document, which is intriguing.
Yeah. Always adds a bit of mystery, doesn't it? But based on what the blog pieced together, there seemed to be about 4 key things Piastri did, let's say, correctly in that situation.
Okay, what were they?
Well, first, his front axle was apparently alongside Verstappen's mirror. That's a common reference point. Second, Piastri kept his car fully under control during the whole move. Third, crucially, he didn't deliberately push Verstappen off. Verstappen was, alongside him at that point.
Right. And the fourth?
Piastri stayed on the track himself, kept it within the white lines.
So if Piastri ticked all those boxes?
Exactly. F1 blogs suggest that's why his move was seen as legitimate by the stewards. Verstappen going off track and, well, not really giving back any time. That seems to be what triggered the penalty flag.
But then Red Bull comes into it. Because, as F1 blogs details, they see it completely differently. Christian Horner presented this new evidence.
Yeah, apparently a printed still image from a different onboard camera.
And what did that supposedly show?
Their argument, based on this image, was that Verstappen was actually ahead of Piastri right at the apex of the corner.
Ahead at the apex. Okay, so the implication is
that Piastri didn't leave him enough room, that Piastri kind of crowded him out, as the blog puts it.
But how does that square with the steward's decision? Did they see this angle?
Well, the F1 blog's commentary suggests the stewards probably did see various angles, maybe even that one, but perhaps interpreted it differently.
How so?
Like maybe that still image captured a moment just after Verstappen was already committed, maybe off the brakes a bit and heading wide anyway. So Red Bull sees it as proof Piastri caused it.
While the stewards saw it as Verstappen already being offline.
Potentially, yeah.
Yeah.
It just shows how one split-second frame can be read in totally different ways, doesn't it?
It really does. Okay, what about McLaren then? Andrea Stella's view, according to F1 blogs.
Stella was pretty firm. He felt Piastri had, quote, won the right to the corner.
Won right to the corner.
Meaning he was ahead on entry, ahead at the apex, and crucially, stayed within the track limits. Simple as that from their perspective.
And the blog mentions McLaren felt Red Bull should have just told Verstappen to give the place back.
Yes, and they even brought up a comparison, that situation in Bahrain with Lando Norris and Lewis Hamilton, where McLaren did tell Lando to concede.
Ah, okay, so they're suggesting Red Bull either genuinely thought Max was right.
Or, and this is an interesting angle F1 blogs touches on, maybe they thought Verstappen wouldn't have listened anyway. Or maybe it wasn't clear-cut enough for them to make that instant call. Right. It definitely highlights that team dynamic.
And Verstappen himself, F1 blog says he was pretty tight-lipped.
Very much so. He sort of hinted at saying what he really thought might get him penalized.
Penalized for his opinion.
Apparently. He mentioned potential penalties for swearing, insults, even causing moral injury. The blog points out the list of potential offenses is pretty long.
Wow. So keeping quiet was probably the smart play then.
That's how F1 blogs interprets it, yeah. Avoid the drama, avoid extra penalties, just focus on the championship fight. Seems like a calculated silence.
Right, strategic. Okay, so despite Red Bull having this new camera angle and disagreeing, F1 blogs doesn't expect a formal protest or a right of review appeal.
Doesn't sound like it, no. Mainly because Verstappen already served the penalty in the pits, the 5 seconds. It's done, race-wise.
So what are they doing then? Just dropping it?
Not quite. The blog indicates they do plan to talk to the FIA, show them their evidence, discuss the incident.
Ah, okay. So it's more about clarification.
Exactly. Getting a clear understanding of the rules, especially about how much space the overtaking car needs to leave. The feeling, according to F1 blogs, is that trying to overturn this penalty now would be a long shot, especially since the stewards were unanimous.
So this isn't about the Saudi result anymore. It's about setting precedent for the future. It seems that way. Red Bull wants clarity, particularly for these kinds of wheel-to-wheel battles. Maybe influence how similar incidents are judged down the road. It makes sense, given how close things often are.
And F1 blogs also brings up the wider context, doesn't it? About how important Turn 1 is in modern F1.
Yeah, massively important. With the dirty air effect making overtaking so hard later in the race, getting track position at the start is absolutely crucial.
So Red Bull pushing for clarity on these first corner rules makes a lot of sense.
Definitely. And the blog even hints at some possible minor tweaks to the racing rules this season, maybe focusing more on what the defending driver has to do, though nothing official on that yet.
Interesting. So these rules might be evolving slightly anyway?
Could be. Any change, even small, around responsibilities for leaving space could really impact how drivers approach those opening corners.
Okay, and just to remind ourselves how it all shook out on the race itself, F1 blogs notes Piastri won.
Yep, Piastri first, Verstappen second despite the penalty, and landonorris fourth.
And the championship picture. Piastri leading with 99 points, Norris on 89, and Verstappen close behind on 87. Very tight at the top.
So that penalty definitely mattered for the win, but F1 blogs also points out Verstappen's start wasn't perfect either.
Right. He had a slightly slow getaway, which put him under pressure from Piastri in the first place. So there's an argument presented in the blog's analysis that the penalty was fair, maybe even lenient, all things considered.
It just shows how these championship fights can swing on single moments, track position.
Absolutely. Every point counts, and incidents like this can be decisive. Even if Verstappen felt hard done by, second place is still a decent haul of points.
So, okay, let's zoom out. Taking everything from the F1 blogs coverage, what's the big takeaway here for someone trying to follow F1 closely?
Well, I think it really highlights just how complex and frankly debatable F1's racing rules can be. You see how a split-second incident gets analyzed to death?
Yeah, with teams bringing photos and data.
Exactly. And how different people, different teams, can look at the exact same event and come away with completely opposite conclusions about who is right or wrong.
It really boils down to that fundamental question, doesn't it? Where is that line between good, hard racing and something that needs a penalty, especially in the heat of the moment?
And how much should new evidence, like that photo Red Bull had, matter after the decision's been made by the stewards on the spot?
That's a tricky one. And Red Bull going to the FIA for clarity shows it's not just about this one race, right? It's about defining the rules of engagement for the future.
Precisely. They want to know the boundaries for the next time they're in that situation.
So just to leave our listeners with something to chew on, even with all the tech, the telemetry, the multiple camera angles, it still comes down to human interpretation, doesn't it?
Always. Subjectivity plays a huge role.
So what criteria do you think should carry the most weight when the stewards are deciding fault in these tight wheel-to-wheel moments? Is it who's ahead? Is it who stays on track? Is it intent?
It's a fascinating debate. This whole saga over one corner gives you a real glimpse into that complex world. The regs, the drivers pushing limits, the stewards trying to keep it fair. It reminds you that even in a sport obsessed with engineering precision,
Human judgment is still absolutely key.